built for 400 prisoners. At the moment, it holds 7,000.
Russia's Black Dolphin prison houses some of the country's toughest, most violent criminals.
Latin American prisons, especially those in Venezuela, are famous for their overcrowding and for the way they're run.
Prepare to be shocked as we delve into the world's most notorious prisons, where brutality, overcrowding, and inhumane conditions are the norm. From Venezuela's Sabaneta to Russia's Black Dolphin, these hellish environments reveal the darkest depths of human incarceration. We will journey into places where survival is a daily struggle and cruelty knows no bounds. Number 10. Pul-e-Charkhi Prison. Pul-e-Charkhi Prison, known as the Afghan National Detention Facility, sits on the outskirts of Kabul, Afghanistan. It's a place that echoes with the horrors of history, a place that has seen unspeakable atrocities and still houses a dark legacy. It was built in the 1970s under the rule of President Mohammed Dawood Khan. Pul-e-Charkhi's initial purpose was to serve as a maximum security facility, but its notoriety skyrocketed after the 1978 Saur Revolution. Under the communist regime, the prison became a chamber of horrors. Between 1978 and 1979, it's believed that around 27,000 political prisoners were executed here. Think about that. 27,000 lives were extinguished in just over a year. Fast forward to December 2006, a mass grave near the prison was uncovered by NATO, containing around 2,000 bodies. Imagine the relentless brutality that unfolded within Pul-e-Charkhi's walls. Life inside the prison is anything but humane. The facility was built to house between 5,000 and 14,000 inmates, but holds only about 2,000 to 2,500 prisoners. But don't let the numbers fool you. Conditions inside are abysmal. With only 3 of the 8 cell blocks in use, overcrowding remains a significant issue. Female prisoners are kept in a special section, yet their treatment is hardly any better. The prison has no proper sanitation. Hundreds of prisoners line up for hours just to use makeshift toilets. Inmates rely on dry bread and tea, often provided by their families if they're lucky enough to receive visits. Torture and abuse are rampant, with political prisoners frequently targeted. New inmates are tortured with electric shocks upon arrival. Sleep deprivation, brutal interrogations, and horrific living conditions are a daily reality. Nighttime executions and drunken beatings from guards were commonplace, adding to the relentless psychological torment. Riots and escapes are a frequent occurrence in Pul-e-Charkhi's violent history. In December 2004, a brawl between foreign prisoners and guards with razor blades left several dead. By February 2006, another riot erupted over new regulations forcing inmates to wear bright orange clothing, leading to 6 deaths and dozens of injuries. Makeshift weapons, fires, and chaos dominated the prison for days until authorities regained control. In March 2008, a dispute over arrests following an attempted jailbreak led to another riot. Gunfire echoed through the prison as inmates claimed to hold Afghan National Army soldiers hostage, demanding mediation. 2021 saw a new and turbulent chapter in Pul-e-Charkhi's history. Following the fall of President Ashraf Ghani's government, the Taliban took control of the prison and released most of the inmates, including many of their own members. And get this, the former inmates ended up in authoritative positions in the prison. What followed was physical assault and torture of political prisoners. Pul-e-Charkhi's history is stained with blood and suffering and is a stark reminder of what happens when humanity is forgotten. Number 9. Goldani Prison, Georgia. The Goldani prison scandal in Georgia revealed a horrifying glimpse into the abuse and mistreatment rampant in the country's prison system. On September 18, 2012, videos surfaced showing guards at Goldani prison torturing, taunting, and sexually assaulting detainees. These shocking images confirmed long-standing allegations of inhumane treatment within Georgian prisons. A former prison officer named Vladimir Bedukadze, who had fled to Belgium, leaked the videos. He was also wanted in connection with the abuse but was eventually absolved of criminal responsibility in exchange for exposing these systemic crimes. The footage depicted unimaginable cruelty, prisoners being raped with broom handles and police batons, subjected to brutal beatings, and forced into humiliating and degrading acts. One particularly disturbing clip showed a man being sodomized with a broom, while others depicted inmates being physically and verbally abused by guards. Torture was normalized inside the prison. In fact, the beating of newly arrived prisoners was routine practice in Goldani prison. It was called the quarantine procedure, and the beating was always brutal. Former prisoners recounted their harrowing experiences of beatings, simulated drowning, and intentional bone breaking at the hands of guards and officials. One former inmate described being drowned in a bucket of water and threatened with rape, while another spoke of having their fingernails torn off, their skull damaged, and their bones broken. The abuse was so severe that some prisoners were left permanently disfigured or disabled. The problem of torture and abuse in Georgian prisons was so widespread that in 2005, the UN's Special Rapporteur on Torture noted that violence in prisons was considered normal and even encouraged. The release of the video sparked outrage across Georgia, leading to widespread protests in many cities. Upset by the graphic abuse, protesters demanded justice and promised to continue their demonstrations until action was taken. The scandal forced the resignation of the prison minister and the chairman of the penitentiary department. The scandal and subsequent reforms marked a significant turning point in Georgia's approach to human rights. The change of government in 2012 catalyzed efforts to improve the prison system and protect human rights. By 2015, the UN found that conditions had vastly changed and for the better. By 2021, Georgia ranked 96th in the world for prison population per capita, a stark contrast to its previous position as one of the highest incarcerators per capita in Europe. Despite these improvements, challenges remain. The Georgian Parliament's Human Rights and Civil Integration Committee continues to monitor the situation, ensuring that the same systematic violence and torture do not recur. The Godani prison scandal stands as a powerful reminder of the importance of vigilance, transparency, and accountability in safeguarding human rights. Number 8. Petak Island Prison. Petak Island Prison is located deep in the isolated expanse of Russia's Vologda region on a tiny island. The name of the island itself must tell you what to expect from this: Ogneni Ostrov, or Fire Island. Petak Island Prison is often referred to as Russia's Alcatraz. But make no mistake, Petak's reputation surpasses that of its American counterpart in sheer bleakness and psychological torment. Inmates here spend 22.5 hours a day in a two-man cell. They only get 2 brief visits from the outside world each year. Yes, only 2 visits a year. That's the harsh reality for the 193 inmates serving life sentences here. They are surrounded by the freezing waters of Lake Novosero. Escape is an unthinkable fantasy. If they dig, they hit water. If they try to swim, the guards will shoot them. This prison isn't just physically inescapable, it's a psychological maze designed to break even the toughest souls. The prison destroys people. After 3 or 4 years, their personalities begin to deteriorate, and there is no way anyone can spend 25 years there without being psychologically destroyed. The isolation is profound. It is in fact the worst. There are no lavatories, no proper washing facilities, and inmates spend their whole life in a cell. They make their room their home, and one day it will be their grave. Most inmates ask their own wives to divorce them and move on with their lives. Such is the hopelessness that this prison brings about in its inmates. And it only gets worse if an inmate steps out of line. Misbehavior results in a 15-day stint in a small dark cell with nothing but a metal bucket and a wooden perch. The sheer monotony and lack of human contact drive inmates to the brink of madness. The conditions are grim beyond belief. Facilities are ancient at best. Think steel buckets for toilets and wooden planks for beds. The hour-and-a-half of daily outdoor time is spent pacing back and forth in a tiny cage. It's no wonder that half of the inmates suffer from tuberculosis due to the lack of proper hygiene and medical care. Petak's isolation provides a twisted form of protection from the typical prison horrors of violence and rape. But the psychological torment here is a different beast. It eats away at the mind, turning the prison into a mental torture chamber that leaves no inmate unscathed. Number 7. Tadmor Prison, Syria. Tadmor Prison is known as the most notorious jail in Syria. Located in the barren deserts of eastern Syria, about 200 kilometers northeast of Damascus, Tadmor was synonymous with death, torture, and madness. It was built by the French in the 1930s. It gained its dreadful reputation during Hafez al-Assad's 30-year rule from 1971 to 2000. During the 1980s, it housed thousands of prisoners, both political and criminal, and became the site of one of Syria's darkest episodes, the Tadmor Prison Massacre of June 27, 1980. Following a failed assassination attempt on President Hafez al-Assad by the Muslim Brotherhood, his brother, Rifat al-Assad, ordered a brutal retaliation. Soldiers from the defense brigades entered Tadmor at dawn and slaughtered an estimated 1,000 prisoners. This massacre is etched into Syria's collective memory as a grim symbol of unchecked power and brutality. Life inside Tadmor was a relentless nightmare. Prisoners were subjected to arbitrary detention, torture, and summary executions. It was a place devoid of basic human rights. The only companions for prisoners there were fear and horror. Here is a good example of the psyche of the people who ran the prison. The reception party for new prisoners was a gruesome initiation involving severe beatings. One former detainee recounted being whipped mercilessly upon arrival. He was forced into a car tire and beaten on his feet up to 400 times. The brutality continued daily, with prisoners subjected to random beatings, eye gouging, and broken limbs. Torture was not only a method of punishment, but also a form of twisted entertainment for the guards. Some prisoners were even forced to engage in humiliating and degrading tasks, like moving slippers with their mouths all night. Medical care was non-existent. The guards did not treat inmates as humans. When requested for medical help, the guards' chilling response was, "Only call us to collect bodies." Detainees who resisted or failed to comply with the guards' sadistic demands were often beaten to death. The psychological toll was immense. Prisoners couldn't make eye contact, not even with their fellow inmates, and it took years after their release for some to regain the ability to look people in the eye. In May 2015, when the Islamic State seized Palmyra, one of their first acts was to blow up Tadmor prison. This act of destruction was symbolic, a gesture to erase the physical structure that bore witness to decades of unspeakable atrocities. Number 6. Gitarama Central Prison, Rwanda. Gitarama Central Prison in Rwanda is one of the world's most nightmarish penitentiaries. It is a perfect example of the horrors of overcrowding and neglect. It was meant to house only 400 inmates, but instead is packed with an astonishing 7,000 inmates. This extreme overcrowding has turned Gitarama into a living hell, where inmates face agonizing choices. Survival is a daily battle. Inmates are forced to sleep in shifts on the ground or in a crouched position, waiting for their turn to rest. The single cells, barely large enough to stand in, offer no respite. Prisoners are forced to stand on filthy, unhygienic floors for prolonged periods and often have their toes, legs, and feet mutilated due to the unbearable strain. To make matters worse, the prison lacks a sewer system, forcing prisoners to wade through their own waste while battling swarms of mosquitoes. The prison administration, overwhelmed and indifferent, does little to alleviate the suffering. Medical care is non-existent and diseases run rampant. There are even rumors that the dire conditions have led to some prisoners resorting to cannibalism out of sheer desperation. Hunger and hopelessness can drive people to unthinkable acts. The prison truly is a melting pot of the country's most dangerous criminals: robbers, rapists, murderers. And most in the prison are serving life sentences with little to lose. This volatile mix breeds an environment where respect is earned through violence. You know what this translates to: more violence and more suffering. Rwanda's history adds another layer of complexity to Gitarama's grim reality. Following the horrific genocide in 1994, where 1 million people were killed in just 3 months, the situation hit a critical point during the 1990s. This led to a humanitarian crisis within the prison walls. The sheer number of inmates resulted in unspeakable conditions. Post the 90s, Rwanda has made significant strides towards peace and prosperity within. However, the shadow of its past lingers in the appalling conditions at Gitarama Central Prison. Despite Rwanda's progress, the prison remains a stain on the nation's efforts towards development and reform. This is a place where human dignity is stripped away, and the only thing left within those walls is pain and despair. Number 5. La Sabaneta Prison, Venezuela. Maracaibo National Prison, or Sabaneta Prison as it is commonly known, is in the city of Maracaibo, Venezuela. It is infamous for its disturbing conditions and violent history. It was one of the world's most dreaded penitentiaries, filled with chaos and brutality. The facility was built to accommodate 700 inmates. By the time of its closing, it was crammed with over 3,700 inmates. The overcrowding alone paints a very grim picture, but it gets worse. Among these thousands were approximately 192 children who were born to the inmates inside the prison. Imagine being born and raised among the most hardened criminals on the planet. It's beyond nightmarish. The official operators were mere spectators, and running the prison was far beyond their control. The inmates ran the show. Gangs ruled with iron fists, led by an inmate leader who was known as the Pran. Just imagine the twisted hierarchy of power within those prison walls. The Venezuelan government had minimal control. The prison had become a kingdom of its own, a kingdom built on violence, fear, and survival. January 3rd, 1994 was one of the darkest nights in Sabaneta's history. A fire broke out and it was followed by a riot. The fire wasn't an accident. Actually, it was the inmates, driven by gang rivalries, who set the fire. As panic spread through the prison, they attacked others trying to flee the fire. The aftermath was catastrophic. Some sources suggest over 150 lives were lost as security forces struggled to regain control. This horrific incident brought the hard and dangerous conditions of Venezuelan prisons into the global spotlight. But the 1994 riot was not an isolated event. Smaller riots were a frequent occurrence, the result of ever-present tensions and scarce resources. In 2012, a shocking revelation emerged. Only 8 wardens and 32 National Guard officers were tasked with overseeing thousands of inmates. It's no wonder that gang violence was rampant, with 69 prisoners dying due to violence in 2013 alone. The lack of governmental oversight allowed prisoners to illegally get all kinds of stuff into the prison. Periodic raids uncovered caches of weapons and drugs. In one bizarre twist, authorities even discovered jungle animals, including endangered species, within the prison walls. All those scenes in dystopian novels and movies were tragically a reality inside Sabaneta. Mocho Edwin was the prison's last pran. He was brutal and unforgiving. Known for drug dealing and prostitution, his criminal empire extended both inside and outside the prison. His connections, including alleged ties to government officials, highlight the corruption and impunity that plagued the system. In fact, when the decision to close the prison was made, Mocho Edwin did not want to let go of his kingdom without a fight. But it was eventually closed in 2013 after 16 inmates died in a riot. In August 2023, rumors started doing the rounds that Sabaneta might have reopened, instilling fear among local residents. But this has remained unconfirmed news, still highlighting the lasting terror associated with this prison. It's a dark chapter in the history of Venezuela's penal system. Number 4, Black Dolphin Prison. Black Dolphin Prison, officially known as Penal Colony Number 6, is located near Russia's border with Kazakhstan. This infamous facility is reserved for the nation's most dangerous and deranged criminals, including serial killers, cannibals, and terrorists. With around 700 inmates, this place is not just a prison, it's a fortress of isolation and perpetual surveillance. It is named after a dolphin statue created by the inmates themselves and placed at the prison's entrance. The prisoners are monitored by video cameras 24/7, and guards make rounds every 15 minutes, ensuring that no movement goes unnoticed. They are woken up each day at 6 a.m. and are not allowed to sit on their bed for the next 16 hours. This relentless vigilance sets Black Dolphin apart as a place of unparalleled control and confinement. Inmates live in a cell within a cell, a concept that underscores the layered security. They are confined to 50 square foot cells, shared by 2 individuals. These cells are sealed behind 3 sets of imposing steel doors. There's no prison yard for recreation. Instead, each day, they are granted a mere 90 minutes in a bleak concrete exercise yard, their only glimpse of the outside world. All they can do here is pace back and forth. Meals, consisting of soup and bread, are eaten in their cells, and the only forms of entertainment are books, newspapers, and a radio. Moving within the prison is an ordeal. Inmates are handcuffed, blindfolded, and forced to walk bent over at the waist, a unique protocol designed to prevent them from understanding the prison layout or interacting with others. This method, believed to be exclusive to Black Dolphin, ensures that prisoners remain disoriented and under complete control at all times. The psychological impact of such severe isolation is profound. One of the prisoners serving a life sentence for murdering an entire family described the mental toll. If you constantly think about how you are here, what is waiting for you, that you won't ever get free, that you are left here alone, you simply won't make it. The guards at Black Dolphin share no attachment or sympathy towards the inmates. This detachment reflects the prison's ethos, where the most dangerous individuals are kept under the strictest conditions, isolated from society forever. Black Dolphin Prison stands as a testament to Russia's uncompromising approach to containing its most dangerous criminals. It's a place where the harshest measures are employed to maintain control, but at the same time, it raises profound ethical questions about the limits of punishment and the impact of extreme isolation on human beings. Number 3, Diyarbakir Prison, Turkey. Diyarbakir prison, located in southeastern Turkey, is infamous for its brutal history and the systematic torture of its inmates. It was established in 1980. This facility became a symbol of horror, particularly during the early and mid-1980s, a period often referred to as the Hell of Diyarbakir. Following the Turkish military coup on September 12, 1980, the prison came under military control and its inmates were subjected to unspeakable atrocities. During this period, the prison housed far more inmates than its official capacity, leading to severe overcrowding. The facility gained international notoriety as one of the world's most brutal prisons. Between 1981 and 1984, at least 34 prisoners died due to the horrific conditions. The prison's harsh regime included beatings, forced memorization of Turkish nationalist songs, and a ban on speaking any language other than Turkish, aimed at forcibly assimilating Kurdish inmates. The torture methods used in Diyarbakir were both cruel and varied. Prisoners were subjected to severe beatings, sexual humiliation, mock executions, and electric shocks, often targeting sensitive areas like the genitals. Other forms of torture included solitary confinement, sensory deprivation, and forced physical exercise in extreme conditions. One particularly notorious practice involved a German shepherd named Joe, trained to bite the genitals of naked prisoners. The accounts from former prisoners paint a grim picture of life inside Diyarbakir. The prison had a ritualistic welcome for new inmates. It involved severe beatings, followed by being submerged in a bathtub filled with excrement. Can't even imagine how horrible that might have been. Prisoners longed for the relative safety of the torture chambers used during interrogations, as the daily conditions in the prison were far worse. Women inmates were not spared from the brutality. Up to 75 women would be crammed into a ward designed for 25. They were also dealt with the same harsh treatment as men, including military drills and isolation. Despite the horrendous conditions, Diyarbakir prison continued to function. Plans to convert it into a school were announced in 2009, but were met with criticism from Kurdish activists who called for it to be turned into a human rights museum, a museum of shame, to commemorate the suffering endured within its walls. As of now, Diyarbakir remains a functioning prison, its future still undecided. Number 2. La Modelo Prison, Colombia. La Modelo Prison in Bogotá, Colombia is famously known as the Prison of Death. It is split into two wings and represents a battleground where left-wing rebels clash with right-wing government supporters. The space between these wings isn't just a neutral zone, it's a war zone. Unless it is a full-blown riot, the prison staff are mere spectators to the violence. Like most dangerous prisons in the world, La Modelo also has a severe overcrowding issue, with rates over 50%. Life in La Modelo is grim, marked by filthy, neglectful conditions and constant maltreatment. The prisoners are forced to sleep in shifts due to the lack of space. Access to healthcare is almost non-existent, with prisoners frequently denied medical attention for severe conditions. The daily struggle for survival is exacerbated by limited access to fresh water, averaging just 15 minutes a day. Meals are often contaminated, and toilets and showers are frequently out of order. The neglect and inhumane treatment have led to many deaths from untreated illnesses and infections. This dire situation reached a horrifying peak in 2016 when the remains of more than 100 dismembered prisoners and visitors were discovered in the prison's drain pipes. The massacre at La Modelo occurred just days before the 20th anniversary of an accord between the US and Colombia aimed at reforming the prison system. Instead of improvements, the overcrowding in Colombian jails has reached unprecedented levels, and human rights abuses remain a daily occurrence. In March 2020, a riot broke out fueled by fear of the COVID-19 pandemic. Colombian armed forces attacked the prisoners and killed 23 inmates and injured 83. The incident underscored the volatile environment within La Modelo, where fear can quickly turn into deadly chaos. In 2024, the assassination of La Modelo's director, Elmer Fernandez, ignited another wave of violence. A riot erupted in blocks 4 and 5. Special forces were forced to intervene with tear gas to quell the unrest. The horrible conditions and harsh truth of La Modelo prison are a grim testament to the consequences of neglect, overcrowding, and corruption in correctional facilities. Number 1. Hworyong Concentration Camp, or Camp 22, North Korea. Hworyong Concentration Camp, or Camp 22 in North Korea, was not a prison. It was a place where those deemed enemies of the North Korean state were sent to die. It stands as a reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the harrowing conditions faced by those who oppose the regime. Camp 22 was reported to have been closed in 2012. It was a maximum security area completely isolated from the outside world, designed to keep its dark secrets hidden behind electric fences and barbed wire. There is a reason why Camp 22 was not just a prison. Consider this. It sprawled over an area of approximately 225 square kilometers or 87 square miles. It had an inner free 300-volt electric fence and an outer barbed wire fence, separated by traps and hidden nails. The penal labor colony was controlled by roughly 1,000 guards armed with automatic rifles, machine guns, and grenades. You won't even be able to imagine how many prisoners this fortress of torment housed. Here it is, a massive 50,000 prisoners. These inmates not only included those who criticized the government and those who were deemed politically unreliable individuals, it also included their families. They were all imprisoned under the draconian guilt by association principle. That is, if a man commits a crime, his wife, children, and parents will also be imprisoned just because they are associated to him. Life in Camp 22 was a relentless cycle of starvation, brutality, and forced labor. Prisoners received a meager 180 grams of corn per meal twice a day. Many would feel lucky if they could catch whatever rats, snakes, or insects they could find. It was a bonus addition to their meal. Malnutrition was rampant, with an estimated 1,500 to 2,000 inmates, mostly children, dying each year. Yet, the camp's population remained constant, as new prisoners replaced the deceased in a never-ending cycle of despair. Former guard An Myung-chol painted a horrific picture of life inside the camp. He described prisoners as walking skeletons with deformities resulting from severe beatings and mistreatment. Children were forced to work from the age of 6 and received minimal education and even less food. Many did not survive past the age of 10. Elderly prisoners were not spared from the grueling labor either, and anyone unlucky enough to seriously fall ill was simply left to die. The labor was backbreaking and unending, with prisoners toiling from dawn till dusk in agriculture, mining, and factories. Safety was non-existent and accidents were commonplace. When tunnels collapsed, prisoners were abandoned, left to die in the rubble. Their bodies were often disposed of along with coal, their remains burnt in furnaces, reducing human beings to mere fuel. Torture was routine, with methods designed to break the human spirit. Prisoners endured water torture, hanging torture, and the infamous pigeon torture, where they were forced to crouch for hours, causing excruciating pain. Sexual violence was rampant, and female prisoners who resisted were often killed. Public executions were replaced by secret killings in the 1990s as guards feared riots. Violations of camp rules led to further brutal punishments, including reduced meals, beatings, and solitary confinement. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of Camp 22 was the reported human experimentation. Former security officer Kwon Hyuk described witnessing a family, including 2 children, die from exposure to asphyxiant gas in a sealed glass chamber. Inexperienced medical officers practiced surgery on prisoners, often resulting in death or permanent disability. The camp's closure in 2012 has done little to erase its dark legacy. It is a stark reminder of the extent to which people in power go to hold on to that power. Unchecked power almost always results in cruelty and suffering. In these notorious prisons, the relentless brutality and inhumane conditions expose the darkest facets of human incarceration. These grim realities serve as stark reminders of the urgent need for prison reform and the protection of basic human rights, even for the most heinous criminals on the planet. Not because they deserve it, but because we are better than this. What do you think?